Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a seriously paradigm-shifting paper by John Cantillo titled The Organization of Consciousness. It asks us to question something so deeply ingrained in our moment-to-moment existence, we honestly rarely even notice it. Like, what if ordinary, waking consciousness, the exact way you're experiencing my voice right now, is not actually the baseline of existence? It's a wildly provocative thought, right? What if your everyday waking life just isn't the default state of your mind? What if what you experience day in and day out isn't consciousness in its most primitive, basic form, but rather a highly specialized, highly constrained biological tool built for one primary purpose: keeping you alive? All right, Section 1, the hard problem, reformulated. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp Cantillo's framework, we first have to look at the traditional philosophical hurdles that have basically stumped scientists for decades. For years, the study of the mind has been completely dominated by what is famously called the hard problem. It usually goes like this: how do physical processes, like wet neurons firing away in the brain, generate subjective consciousness? But Cantillo points out a massive trap here. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a conceptual roadblock. This traditional question assumes that our waking cognition, our memory, our sense of having a physical body, our focus, and consciousness itself are the exact same thing. And treating them as a single, tangled knot, that is exactly what keeps science stuck. So Cantillo does something absolutely brilliant. He essentially splits this stubborn explanatory gap right down the middle into two distinct, separate questions. On one side, we have the origin of experiential presence itself. Why there is something that it's like to exist at all. Cantillo freely admits this remains totally unresolved. We still don't know why raw experience exists. But on the other side, we have the organization of experience for survival. How does that raw awareness get molded and locked into the highly adaptive waking life we know? This second question, this one is tractable. It's something evolutionary biology can actually help us answer. Moving on to Section 2, Observer versus Actor Organization. To tackle that second, tractable question, we literally have to peel consciousness apart into two separate layers. The absolute foundation is what he calls the observer. And this is incredibly minimal. It's just raw experiential presence, a basic point of view existing in space and time. There's no personal history here, no biological needs, just pure, unconstrained awareness. Now, what's really interesting about this is what gets superimposed directly on top of that raw observer. Enter the actor organization. Think of the actor as a highly sophisticated biological survival suit. It brings embodiment, the ability to actually take action, predictive processing, memory, and a complex sense of self. The actor's job isn't to create consciousness. Its job is to regulate it, to localize it so you can successfully navigate a pretty dangerous physical world. Which brings us to Section 3, 3 levels of identity. Because of this whole observer-actor split, our sense of self isn't just one monolithic thing. It's a layered construct built step by step by evolutionary biology. Let's walk through how biology stacks all this complexity right on top of raw experience. At the very base, the foundation, we have reference identity. This is literally just the bare-bones awareness that there is an I. Next up, biology adds indexed identity. This ties that awareness to a physical body. I am this specific organism, right here, right now. Finally, at the very top, we get narrative identity. I am this specific person with a name, a history, and relationships. Let's zoom in on that top layer for a second. Narrative identity. This is the whole shebang: your autobiographical memory, your personality, your beliefs, and your social roles. But notice how incredibly variable this layer is. You know that feeling when you wake up from a super deep sleep and for like 3 seconds you have absolutely no idea who or where you are? Or think about deep meditation. Your personal history fades, your social role vanishes, yet you are still undeniably conscious. This proves that our everyday waking self, our narrative identity, is not the most primitive level of consciousness. It can literally be stripped away while the core observer remains totally intact. All right, Section 4, the glue of salience. This leads us to a pretty massive question. How do this infinite, raw observer and this biological, survival-driven actor actually get coupled together in the first place? What is the glue? Well, think about this. If everything is equally important, nothing is important. An organism simply cannot survive if it can't prioritize what matters. If the rustle of a predator in the bushes is given the exact same mental weight as the shape of a random fluffy cloud in the sky, well, that organism is not going to live very long, is it? So the crucial point is that salience acts as the glue holding it all together. Salience organization is the continual localization of experience, toward this specific organism, this exact place, and this exact moment. It's the mechanism that takes the infinite, unconstrained accessibility of the observer and aggressively narrows it down into a highly constrained, prioritized survival mode. It takes raw experience and basically yells, pay attention to exactly this, right now, because your persistence depends on it.
Next up, Section 5, the threshold problem.
So you might be wondering, at what exact point in biological evolution does this tight coupling between the observer and the actor actually happen? When does the survival suit fully zip up? To make this abstract threshold problem super tangible, let's look at a fascinating boundary case. Does an amoeba have waking consciousness?
And this brilliantly illustrates just how complex this issue really is. Look at what an amoeba can do. It has biological individuality, it maintains itself, and it clearly shows approach and avoidance behaviors. It definitively has basic operational salience. It knows to move toward food and swim away from toxins. But does it have the complex, inner, phenomenological salience required to actually experience ordinary waking consciousness like we do? Probably not. The threshold isn't a sharp, definitive line. It's a gradual, evolutionary tightening of that observer-actor coupling over millions of years.
Let's move to Section 6 and see how this builds. Altered states and constraints. So, what happens when we run this whole process in reverse? When the biological survival suit loosens its grip? Well, let's take a look. In ordinary waking life, the actor constraints are incredibly strong, right? They make our conscious accessibility narrow and purely survival-focused. But in extraordinary states, think dreaming, deep contemplative meditation, or even near-death experiences, those actor constraints relax. The biological localization mechanisms just kind of power down. And when that happens, conscious accessibility modifies and expands into what Cannibal calls omni-non, a vast, newly accessible landscape of experience. These extraordinary states aren't magic. They are simply lawful variations of what happens when our biological prioritization system finally lets go. This brings us to a really profound conclusion. Waking life isn't the totality of consciousness. It's literally just the survival mode. This framework completely reframes our everyday reality. Evolution didn't necessarily generate consciousness out of thin air. Rather, it built an incredibly sophisticated mechanism to localize it, to anchor it to a vulnerable physical body, and to keep that body alive. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this perspective, and I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your everyday waking life is just a highly constrained survival mode, what vast landscapes of experience is your mind actually capable of accessing when those constraints are finally lifted?